Hello, this is Gloomy Sunday, and once again, I will be sharing spooky stories that will send shivers down your thorny spine. Without further ado, let's begin tonight's creepy, spooky, and sometimes outlandish array of tales. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. This story happened to my cousin Rocky during a deer hunting trip with my uncles. One evening, they decided to hunt at a new location near some corn and cotton fields. It was late afternoon, and typically, hunters climb down from the tree stand at dusk. But one of my uncles suggested, stay up in the tree until it's completely dark. That's when the deer come out. Rocky agreed. He found a tall pine tree, climbed up, and settled in. As the sun began to set, around 7 or 8 p.m., Rocky suddenly heard the crunching of leaves, like something running toward him. Since it was winter, the ground was covered in dry leaves, so the sound was unmistakable. Rocky figured it had to be a deer. The footsteps stopped directly beneath his tree. He thought, "This is it. I'm taking the shot." It was hard to see in the fading light, so he turned on his flashlight and shone it at the base of the tree where he thought the deer had stopped. But there was nothing there. Confused, he scanned the area with his flashlight. Still nothing. Certain he had heard something, Rocky turned off the light and decided to wait a little longer. The forest became eerily silent. No footsteps. No rustling. Just stillness. Suddenly, he felt something hit his shoulder. It wasn't heavy, like a small nut falling, but Rocky knew pine trees don't drop nuts. He brushed it off as nothing until he heard a faint scratching sound from below. He aimed his flashlight at the base of the tree. That's when he saw her. A black, shadowy figure of a woman with long, unkempt hair. She stood there, staring up at him, her nails dragging slowly against the bark. In a chilling, raspy voice, she whispered for him to come down. Rocky froze in terror, unsure of what to do. Then, to his horror, the figure began climbing the tree, slowly but steadily, toward him. Panic overtook him, and he snapped. He jumped off the tree stand, a fall of 20 to 30 feet, leaving behind his gun and flashlight. Somehow, he hit the ground and ran, too terrified to look back. It wasn't until morning that my uncles found him curled up, trembling and incoherent. They couldn't believe he had jumped from such a height without serious injury. When they checked the tree stand, everything was still in place, except for the eerie scratches marking the bark. Shaken, they called a pastor and other church members to pray over him. Later, they researched the area and discovered it had been a site of significant suffering during the Civil War and was once a location where enslaved people were kept. That was really spooky. The hunter definitely became the hunted in that scenario. Let's read the next story. I used to live in a small city in Colorado with my husband and 3 kids. When my 19-year-old sister and her daughter needed a place to stay, we started searching for rental units. At the time, she was 3 to 4 months pregnant with her ex's baby and couldn't afford most places we found. Finally, we came across a small, 2-bedroom duplex that was cheap and just a few blocks from my house. Because she worked late, we couldn't see the place until it was nearly dark. The duplex was unusual. Instead of the 2 units being side by side, the front doors faced the neighboring house. The available unit had windows that looked out onto a back alley, while the occupied unit faced the street. When we arrived, we met the property manager who was showing the place. The moment I stepped inside, I felt an odd, unsettling sensation, but I brushed it off as nerves. The unit was dark since the electricity hadn't been turned on, so we could only see by the fading daylight. We walked through the living room into the dining room, which felt particularly cold and uninviting. Something about the space made me uncomfortable, but I didn't say anything to my sister. Later, I learned I'm an empath or clairvoyant, whatever you want to call it. Despite the eerie vibe, my sister signed a 1-year lease the next day. She was excited to have her own space so close to me and couldn't pass up the affordable rent. For the first few months, things were quiet, although she mentioned having recurring nightmares. I assured her it was nothing. I stayed over with my kids a few times and also had nightmares, but I didn't think much of it until one night when my husband and I argued, and I decided to sleep at her place. That night, she left with her baby's father, leaving me alone. As I sat in the dining room, warming my feet by the heater vent, I noticed something in the corner. A girl was crouched on all fours, her long, tangled hair obscuring her face. She was convulsing and gnawing on something. I froze, unsure whether to scream, cry, or run. Then, as suddenly as she appeared, she vanished. I thought I was losing my mind and told no one, not even my husband. Some time later, my husband and I left our kids with my sister so we could have a night out. On our way back, my sister called, panicked. My 18-month-old daughter, who could only speak a few words, had started screaming, crying, and pointing to the corner of the dining room, saying, "Scare, scare." My sister asked if the other kids had frightened her, but they said no one was near her. Before she could tell me which corner, I interrupted. "Let me guess. The corner near the windows that meet the kitchen?" She was stunned and asked how I knew. I told her what I'd seen but waited until I got there to explain. She was so terrified that she avoided the house as much as possible after that. Not long after, she and her boyfriend began experiencing something disturbing. Both felt the sensation of being sat on in their sleep. My sister started having vivid dreams of a child who wanted to play with her. When she told the child she was too tired, it poked her in the eye with a sharp fingernail. The next day, her eye was red and infected. This happened again a week later, with the same result. In her dream, the child threatened,
"If you won't play with me, I'll wait for your baby to come. Then I'll play with your baby."
Desperate, we turned to my mom for advice. She scolded my sister, saying the house was a bad omen because of its unusual layout and the basement entrance being outside. She accompanied my sister to the house and declared aloud, "Whoever you are not welcome here. You've passed on, and this is no longer your home. You must leave." That same day, I took a nap on my couch and dreamed of 3 or 4 men dressed in old-fashioned clothes. They walked into my house, saying the duplex belonged to them and they wouldn't leave. When I told my mom, she advised my sister to move out, especially since my sister refused to perform cleansing rituals. Eventually, she left before her lease ended. Later, I researched the property but found little information. I did discover it was one of the first homes built for miners who had worked nearby. The train tracks they used for work still run next to the house. I suspect the location near the tracks serves as a portal or crossroad for spirits. The neighbor in the adjoining unit also reported unexplainable phenomena and moved out shortly after my sister. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that there was more than one presence in that house. It is good that the sender's sister left that place before anything bad actually happened. Let's read the last story for this video. A month after my grandmother passed away, I had a dream that still haunts me to this day. In the dream, We were back at the Asian complex apartments where my sibling and I used to play. We were hopping over the 3-foot block fences, trying to reach my grandma, who was preparing to leave. She had always reminded us to gather the Hong clothes she had been sewing for us. As she packed her things, we rushed in through the back sliding door of the complex. Inside, the apartment had a dim, blue-black atmosphere, with the faint rising sunlight as our only way to see clearly. When I saw my grandma, she urgently said,
"Hurry and grab your clothes. They're wrapped there for you. We need to go right now."
I was confused. My grandma rarely left home, so her urgency felt strange. It seemed like she only had 5 minutes to speak with us before she had to leave. I hugged her tightly and pleaded, "Before you leave, can you give us something to remember you by?" I loved my grandma deeply. After she raised me through kindergarten, living without her for 3 years was hard. My request wasn't out of selfishness, I just wanted something to hold on to. As I hugged her, I noticed I couldn't see her face. In my dreams, when people appeared, I could only see them from the shoulders down. Their faces were always blurry. While I clung to her, I felt something on her body, sewing needles. I gently pulled them out and asked, "Why do you have so many needles on you?" She didn't answer and instead turned to leave. Suddenly, the scene shifted, and we were at a vast, empty crossroads. As kids, we often walked everywhere or took buses to get around, but this place was eerily large. There were no cars, no pedestrians, just the white crossing lines and the traffic lights. The atmosphere was peaceful, with bright sunshine and fresh air. For the first time, I could see my grandma more clearly. She started walking across the road, but I couldn't catch up. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't cross. I cried out to her, begging her to wait for me, but she kept moving forward. Just as she disappeared across the road, I woke up sobbing uncontrollably. I wasn't able to attend her funeral. She passed away in North Carolina after spending most of her life in California. My mom's side of the family had mistreated her, and all her sons and her husband had passed before her. What do the needles mean? I know that the dead aren't supposed to have any metal on them in the casket, so was it significant that I took them before she left? I know that I think by removing the needles from her body, by you, her only family that she felt still loved her, you helped her to forgive everyone who hurt her and was able to be at peace before she took her final breath. I hope you enjoyed our spooky and strange stories. Join us next time for more. Take care and boo-bye.